Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Gavin, Aydelotte, and McHugh. Gavin and Mike are second-year students in our Executive MBA class of 2026, and they are also leaders of the Darden Military Association Professional Format Student Organization. I recently connected with Gavin and Mike to talk a little bit more about their backgrounds, their decision to pursue an MBA, what led them to Darden, their plans for the DMA in the months ahead, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Gavin, Aydelotte, and McHugh. Gavin, Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Brett.
It's great to have you here. Gavin, how's everything? I haven't seen you on the streets of Georgetown recently. We occasionally pass each other while I'm coming into work, and I think you're coming from the gym. How is everything?
It's going well. The Georgetown gym has been having power issues, so I've switched up my gym. That's probably the reason why you haven't seen me.
Okay. All right. Well, it's good to see you, Mike. How is everything?
Yeah, good. Busy, trying to keep afloat with school and work, which is always an interesting challenge, but we're getting through it.
That sounds like a typical Executive MBA student right there. So, well, thank you both for coming on the podcast. It's great to catch up with you. We're going to talk about the Darden Military Association Professional Format Student Organization a little bit later in the conversation. Of course, that's really kind of the occasion for today's conversation. But I'd like to start by getting to know you both a little bit better, giving our listeners an opportunity to learn a little bit more about you and your respective backgrounds. So, Mike, can I come to you first? Tell us a little bit more about who you are.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Mike McHugh. I currently work at a company called Angel Industries. It was a small defense tech company when I started. It's a little bigger now. But before that, I was in the Army for a long time as a Black Hawk helicopter pilot. And as I started transitioning to the civilian world, you kind of are surrounded by some of the smartest people you know. And how do you level up your game is basically like, trying to get those bona fides and those skill sets that you need in order to just survive in the civilian world, which the Army doesn't necessarily prepare you for well. And that's so moved to the DC area 2022 when I joined the company. And yeah, my wife and I live in Alexandria with our two cats. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
All right, I want to be real specific about your transitioning timeline, because I think this is something we get asked about a lot from transitioning military members, right? We see folks who are, 8, 9, 10 years in, transitioning out, looking to do something else. We see folks who are retiring from the military and looking to do something else. So it sounds like you kind of found your way into the civilian world and then did an MBA program, but I don't want to speak for you.
No, that's exactly right, Brett. And I might have a slightly different background per se, but I was in the National Guard, but I was a full-time National Guard person, which is basically I wear the uniform every day. But once I left that, I then transitioned to the like a regular guard, which is like 1 week in a month while we had to fly during the week. But yeah, the transitions is challenging and trying to find your spot and trying to find your footing. The Army doesn't necessarily prepare you how to present yourself, how to articulate yourself in some of these business settings. And that's you kind of find yourself in these rooms where you're like, I need to get better quick. So that's where I kind of found myself leaning towards this executive MBA program.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I appreciate you're indulging the follow-up question. It's a question we get asked a lot about prospective students who are in the process of kind of transitioning out and wondering, am I the only person who's ever been in this situation? Are there other people like me? And the answer is, there are absolutely other people like you. And we meet them all the time. We have a number of them in our program. So Gavin, tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I did ROTC in college and commissioned as an explosive ordnance disposal officer into the Army. 10 years and many moves later, I decided to transition out and join Cisco, where I worked at for a year. That's when I got into Darden. And prior to joining Darden, I started my own career coaching and leadership consulting business. And that was an interesting journey, starting my own company, before joining Darden, which is a time-intensive program. Um, since then, I've joined a solar startup that has been a different type of challenge, but I really enjoy like learning a new industry and whatnot. And to the previous conversation on the transition, I decided to spend a little bit of time in the inactive ready reserve while I was at Cisco, and have since gone back to the reserves. And we've got a number of classmates that are also in the reserves. So we've got a good blend of people who have retired, some who did a few years and separated and haven't looked back when they left the military, and some of us who are still serving in the reserves.
I want to ask a reserves question here because we do also get this question, right? We talk to prospective students who have reserve duty and try to figure out how do they make that work alongside the executive MBA program, which does have, weekend residencies on average 1 weekend per month, online classes typically a couple nights per week, most weeks. Gavin, how have you been able to make all these things coexist?
Luckily, I've had a very supportive reserve unit. So when there are conflicts that arise, I work with them to do a program called Station Training, or RST, and reallocate my reserve weekends to another weekend or sometime during the week, because I do have a flexible work schedule. It's a little challenging to navigate all the logistics of a full-time job, a reservist position, and a executive MBA. But having supportive full-time employer and a reservist unit has been very helpful for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we always encourage folks as they approach this process, bring these people in your life along with you as you are researching executive MBA program, help them understand what the time commitment might look like. Obviously, there's a sort of prospective student view on that. And then when you get into the program, there's the current student reality of that. Sometimes these things are aligned, sometimes there's a little bit of a difference there. But having those conversations early often can be really helpful as you're navigating this. So Mike, I'm curious, what appealed to you about Darden? How'd you end up at Darden's executive MBA program?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brett. I guess the one of the biggest things is like 4 or 5 of my colleagues were either in the program or have graduated from the program. So I kind of posted. We have a giant Slack channel for a bunch of military people. I posted anybody know any good schools in the area, just as do like a crowdsourcing, and I got a lot of hits about Darden. Um, and then you start to look into it a little better. Very military friendly. Obviously, one of the top schools for the executive program in the country. And then it also being several train stops away was like a big win to make it all work with like a very, very busy schedule. But really, it was the guys that I work with that were in the program telling me how much they enjoyed the program, how much they enjoyed the people. That was really just an easy fit for me. So I applied early, and luckily it was lucky enough to get in. So, but yeah, that's kind of how I got there and how I picked it.
How about you, Gavin? What got you interested in Darden?
So I had the experience of watching my brother go through Darden. He was an EMBA 21. And when I transitioned off of active duty and landed in DC, I was evaluating my options for higher education, looking at MBA programs. And since I had started my own company, I was going to entrepreneurial events, networking events, defense tech stuff, and I kept running into Darden grads. And so I was very much saw them in places that I wanted to be, and that's why I chose Darden.
All right. So I appreciate the sort of word of mouth that's kind of part of both of your stories, right? Gavin, you obviously have a personal connection with your brother, having gone through the program, seeing him do that. But Mike obviously turned into your colleagues and saying, hey, what might you recommend? And having them come and say, yeah, you know what? I think you should take a look at Darden. We do find that that is oftentimes how people get interested in our program. They have, personal connection. They know someone who's in the cohort or know an alum. So you come to Darden, you're executive MBA students. Obviously, y'all are further along in the process now. You're in the second year. You're taking electives. You can see graduation kind of off in the horizon. Gavin, I'm curious. How did you adjust to work and life and school and all of these things? What was that learning curve like?
Honestly, it was pretty steep. Luckily, I had a very strong learning team that we helped each other balance it out. So for classes that I wasn't very strong in, I could lean on my learning teammates. And I like to think that I helped out in some areas as well. It's always going to be a challenge to balance the multitude of things in anyone's life. But this is something that I made a priority and wanted to get through. So finding those teams and as the cohort has progressed, finding those other teammates that you want to continue to learn from, like Mike or others that have special skills as I'm evaluating other long-term options. It's been great to lean on others and continue to learn even outside the designated classes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your learning team? For our listeners, they may know this already, but learning team's kind of 5 to 6 person team, intentionally sort of made up of people from different academic and professional backgrounds. It's a resource for you both socially, but also particularly academically as you navigate the core curriculum. Tell us about your learning team, Gavin.
Yeah, so at Learning Residency 1 in Charlottesville during orientation, we all sat down and we're telling our stories. Me, 10 years Army, EOD. We had another National Guard full-time service member, a senior executive at a telecommunications company, who also happened to be my fraternity brother from a different school. So that was cool. We had a executive at a pharmaceutical company, and then a entrepreneur as well. So that was a really interesting blend. And some of us have different technical abilities. Some of us have a lot of leadership experience and entrepreneurial experience and marketing experience. So going through the core classes of accounting, finance, marketing, leading organization strategy, it was super helpful to lean on them and learn. And then we absorbed some people for some tough quarters and found other partners to rely on. And it's been a very fluid learning team, which is, I think, super helpful for my learning style.
Yeah, we always tell folks the learning team is a place to start, right? Some of those teams continue to work together throughout the first 6 quarters, 12 months of the program when you're doing the core. That's really when the learning team makes the most sense, where everybody's taking the same classes. But some teams, for whatever reason, oftentimes due to schedule and work preference, may not completely gel. And so you'll see teams kind of break up and other teams kind of absorb members from teams that have split. That's not typically a personality thing. It is oftentimes because the team was just having a hard time finding a schedule that worked with everyone's respective schedules. And so you do have that freedom. And so first quarter, second quarter, kind of that fall semester, you do see a lot of, teams sort of moving around. And so just, for people who may be coming into the program next year, know that great if your learning team hits it off and you find a way to work together. But if you find yourself a little bit of friction there, having a hard time getting on each other's calendars, know that you can join another team too, but you should absolutely be doing this as a collective effort. This Darden is not designed to be done as on an individual basis. You working by yourself. There's too much to do. You make it way harder than it needs to be. Work smarter. Not that's the idea here, right? You're going to get so far as an individual, but you can get a lot further working with your learning team. Mike, how about for you? What was the adjustment like to work and life and school, all of these things coexisting?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to echo a lot of what Gavin already said, but it is an extremely steep curve until you find that footing. It's just a massive adjustment to the free time that you thought you had once, and then trying to balance maybe a demanding career on top of that. But I think Gavin hit on this earlier, where it's like, if as long as you're articulating your problem set to the people around you that need to understand it, it makes it a lot easier. So if you have a supportive family, that's always great because there's not going to be a lot of time for them. If you're very upfront with work about the time that you need, that's great. And then being upfront with your learning team about um, what you can and can't contribute. And luckily, my learning team has been really amazing. There's been a few times where I've been on the road for a few weeks, and everyone's just kind of really helped me out get through these core classes, which has been really helpful. But I do think the name escapes me who told me this, but carving out a period of time for the people that are important for your life every week has been like a godsend to us. Where basically we have one day a week where my wife, we like really block that off, and I protect that. Um, I try really hard to protect that day for us, only because a lot of your time gets sucked up with classes and other things and cases. So just protect the time with your family and just know it's 2 years. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the thing that I always stress with folks as you're looking to do a working professional program is it's going to help you figure out very quickly what your non-negotiables are, what's really important to you, where do you want to put your time and energy. As you have more sort of demands on your time and your energy, you're going to have to make some calls. Like maybe this isn't necessary for you to do X, Y, or Z activity, but it's necessary for you to block off time with your partner, your spouse, significant other. Make sure you have time for your kids' activities or work out or do whatever is necessary for you to maintain your wellness as you go through the program. You should put those things on your calendar just as if they are class sessions or learning team meetings or weekend residencies. I think a lot of people will start from that point. Mike, I'm curious though, as you kind of got in, you mentioned the learning curve, which is absolutely real. And I don't want our listeners to be turned off by that. It's just going from kind of owning your time in a way that you don't necessarily when you're in the executive MBA program, where all of a sudden your downtime is filled with school related activities or prep for class or it's just different. And so how did you manage that with your family, with the other people in your life as you were going from quarter one to quarter two? What were those conversations like?
Well, it's as you are coming in as someone that's been in the working has been working for a few years, you kind of forget how to study. So I would say it's like figuring that out, like what your study style is if you haven't done it in a while. Like for me, it's been like maybe 10 years since I've been in school. So really trying to like hammer that down, and then as you start to figure it out, start making those adjustments with the family so that you can free up your time. Just be smart with your time. The conversations were just like, I can't go to this concert with you, honey. I want to very badly, but I cannot. Uh, and now it's like, we'll figure it out. I'm going to go and I'll figure out the rest. So, it's rough in the beginning. It's hard to articulate only because it's kind of overwhelming. But if you lean on your learning teams, you lean on the people around you when you are struggling, it very much is a rising tide floats all boats where other people are out there struggling. And then people can get you the answers that you need, but really leaning on the people around you is like the only way you can get through this.
Yeah, I think as you noted, it's very important to be open about this. If you're having a hard time, if you're feeling challenged, you're struggling with something, speak up, share that with your classmates. You're not the
Yeah.
only person who feels that. There is a
No.
tendency when you get into a graduate program, sometimes people feel like they have to project a certain image or seem like they have it all together. That is not the way to go about this. You really just want to be honest and open with people. Like, look, it's not decision analysis is not making sense, accounting, finance, whatever it is, just let people know because that's how people can help you. And that asking for help, Gavin, I'm curious. Asking for help is an adjustment for some folks. Don't do that typically in your everyday life or maybe in your day-to-day work, but it will absolutely be part of a student's experience in the executive MBA program. What was the adjustment like for you? How did you manage all of that? I guess is another way of asking that question.
So since I got out of the military, I think I've over-indexed on like trying to ask for help and be there for people as well, which is abnormal from a military perspective. It's abnormal from just like as you get older because you do want to project that like I've got it all together. But it's funny you bring up decision analysis. Like that was a tough class, and I had to rely on a lot of other people's experience to get through it. And luckily, like I think everyone's all in the same boat. We all want to learn. We all want to get better. We all want to take back what we can from these classes into our own lives and our own professional advancement. And I have yet, luckily, because we're all in that same mindset, we're all trying to grow. Nobody has ever, made me feel any less for asking for help or sharing that I don't understand something, which has been incredible. Um, as somebody who got out from the military, where it's a similar perspective of, hey, you got to project, you got it all together, and you know, sometimes you don't.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a very supportive environment, and each class kind of sets their own norms for how they want to engage with each other. But that kind of support is, I would say, perennial. It's not up to one class or another class. Everybody is here to support each other, and that's something we really think about the admissions process too. Is when we're meeting somebody, thinking about how they're going to show up in class, but also how they're going to share their expertise with other people. Are they curious about other people's perspectives? That interpersonal dimension is a big part of what we're trying to get a gauge for in the admissions process because it's very much baked into the learning experience. We talked about learning teams, case method, and of course, all the things that happen outside the classroom, which of course includes student organizations like the Darden Military Association. So, one more question for you, and then we'll talk about the Darden Military Association. I'm curious, Mike, have your career goals evolved during your time in the program? Have they stayed constant? You're now at a point where you're, over a year in. You're taking electives. How are you thinking about things?
For me personally, it's been really interesting because the overall intent to start with Darden was, I guess the term is like, how do I sharpen my blade in an environment where I'm surrounded by very smart people that were some kind of crazy, weird special forces that you didn't hear about or you never heard about, and then they also went to a crazy business school. So I'm sitting in these rooms being like, how do I get better? So that's kind of how I started. And now that I'm here, it's just you're surrounded by a bunch of people that you've never thought you would interact with, and it's like an interesting germination of ideas. So as a person that kind of wanted to be a climber in an organization, which is like still like my main intent, there's like these other like little ideas out there of like, that would be really cool to start a business with this thing to make uh you know, parts for boats. Something I would have never thought of, but a buddy has an idea, right? So it's just like this really interesting thing where I think I'm on the same career path, Brett. But I do know that there is a lot of other options now that it's hard to even fathom what they are, but they're starting to form around you. So it's a really interesting time. But right now I'm a climber, so I just want to maintain that thing. But I do know the next few years could be really interesting about all the opportunities that could present themselves.
Yeah, that resonates. We have a lot of guests come on the podcast who say, okay, I like what I'm doing. I want to continue to grow, but I do feel like I can aspire to a lot of different things at this point. It's
Absolutely.
really opened my aperture, is I think the language that Jim Collins, one of the career coaches, uses for this. Gavin, how have your career goals evolved during your time in the program?
Well, like I said, Brett, I started running my own company, and that was a lot. It was a very challenging time for me, getting that off the ground while starting Darden. I had the opportunity to join a slow development startup, and I think that allowed me to get a little bit more focus while at Darden. But I still have those ideas that I'm working on, and luckily, Darden has so many other opportunities that on Saturday I submitted for a grant for my own startup idea that I'm trying to grow in a year or two, based on my own personal wellness journey. So Darden provides so many opportunities, especially now in electives where we get to choose our own adventure and really like learn what we want to learn. I enjoyed finance; it was great, but entrepreneurial thinking is definitely where I'm enjoying my time, and I'm excited for the second year.
Yeah, it's worth noting. I mean, you're going to take a broad core. There's 10 different topics in the core. They run the gamut from accounting, finance to business ethics, strategy, all manner of things in between. I think most students would tell you they get something out of every class, but not every class is created equal in terms of how they think that class may factor into their career or where they would like to go. I think then you get to electives, and obviously you're in control at that point. You get to take 12 classes. It sounds like, Gavin, you've decided to put a lot of your energy towards entrepreneurial classes. Any other electives that you would want to mention that you're taking here?
Negotiations is really fun. I think that just getting reps through doing exercises is super helpful to refine the skills that we're learning. And in negotiations, we're doing a new negotiation every class, which is super helpful. And one thing I didn't mention that will be helpful for others, I'm doing the Global Executive MBA. So I'm also traveling around the world pretty much once a quarter, learning perspectives from India and Brazil. Morocco is next month, and then Vietnam. So really reinforcing where I wanted to be as kind of a global leader, taking lessons learned from each of those countries that we visit, and a few couple that I add along the way.
Yeah, what's been the best thing about the global residencies? I know it's hard to pick one thing, but what's really stood out to you about the value of those experiences?
For me, it's truly sitting physically in the space of leaders of another country, another continent, and truly understanding their perspective. In India, they very much like want to be that next superpower, but they have very large challenges that they need to overcome. And in Brazil, one of our first speakers is like, "Hey, we're perfectly fine being like, number two on the world stage because we are a large power, but we don't need to flex it in the same way that like an India wants to." And that perspective I think is invaluable because I can listen to hundreds of hours of podcasts and read books, but being able to sit in Sao Paulo and ask those questions alongside my classmates is really powerful for me.
Yeah, these are effectively kind of once in a lifetime type trips, things that you can't really put together as a tourist in these countries. You can't go and meet with senior business leaders and get the sort of inside access to these companies that you get on one of these global courses. And I will note for our listeners, obviously Gavin's doing 4 as a Gemba format student. We have a lot of students who start as EMBA format students and they go on their one global residency and discover they want to do additional global residencies. So if you're listening to this thinking, gosh, it would be nice to go on 4 global residencies, really do give the Gemba, the Global Executive MBA format, some consideration. So something to think about.
Definitely do it.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Gemba students, they have a lot of enthusiasm for that experience. And, they're the only students in the class that get to travel 4 times, get that comparative view across location. I think that's something that people may not at first realize, but like as you go on more of these courses, you will start thinking back to the other locations that you visited and comparing to, well, how is that different in Sao Paulo versus what we saw in Mumbai versus what we're experiencing now in Vietnam? It's not to say that there's not value in doing one global residency. There absolutely is, but that comparative view is definitely something that you'll hear. And then, of course, the relationships that you form. The Gemba students, really, get to know. They don't all go on the same global residencies necessarily, but they will see at least a portion of each other as they go on these courses. And so you form those relationships, of course, over the course of traveling and being outside your sort of home environment and getting into another country. Mike, I'm curious, what electives are you taking? What would you want to mention here?
Yeah, I would say the big thing I want to highlight is the negotiation class that we're currently in is really interesting because you definitely get a lot of reps at a thing that uh, seems easy up front because you see a lot of people do it on TV and stuff. But then when you're in it, there's a lot of nuances, and it is very much a learned skill that if you don't have the tools in your toolkit, you might not be good at it. And maybe you found them along the way and you're good at it now. But I feel like this class is definitely helping me uh, get the tools, understand, there's like um, an aspect to it that's like emotional and some of the other things where if you don't know about it, it's just going off gut and very often is your gut wrong. So I'm excited to start applying a lot of this stuff, in my everyday life, along with in the business world. So negotiation has been really cool. And then currently the disruptions class is learning about, big disruptions in the industries for whatever industry you're in. When you talk about Blockbuster, uh, not realizing that Netflix is going to be a behemoth that it is, and what that looked like from the CEO's perspective. So you're reading the case, you're in the shoes of the Blockbuster CEO, and what do you do about Netflix in the early aughts when it wasn't what it is now? And it's just a really interesting perspective about how disruptions are coming. You can see them, but what actions do you take without having hindsight? And that's also been really, really interesting as well.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting conversation for sure. I think we all remember Blockbuster Video and remember the early days of Netflix of getting DVDs in the mail and then sending them back, and you can only have so
Exactly.
many at a time unless yeah, the whole thing. Well, let's talk about the Darden Military Association for the professional formats. Gavin, how would you describe this organization? What's it all about?
It's about having a space for veterans to ask questions, share ideas, look for feedback. Everybody has different experiences with navigating the VA and the Veterans Benefits Administration for the GI Bill, or even applying for benefits because we've had some classmates that never applied for veterans benefits when they transition out of the military, and so we really are a space to answer those questions and share that. And we also support other organizations. Mike is also the vice president of the Defense and Aerospace Club. We are helping the Christine, who is starting the Darden Defense Conference in October. So lending our expertise to those events and really just being a spot and represent the veterans that are Darden, of which I believe this latest, our cohort was about 40%, which 40% sounds like a lot, but we had some people who transitioned out in early 2000s and some who are getting off of active duty in the program. So all veterans are not created equal, not only from their job, but when they transition out.
Yeah, it's a background, right? It's an experience that someone has had. We see folks, to your point, Gavin, I think it's really important for folks to know. We see some folks who are active duty with the full intention of staying in and see a master's degree as a way of, promoting and continuing to advance within the military, and then maybe creating some opportunities for themselves down the line, right? Have a marketable credential. We see, to my earlier conversation with Mike and his timeline, see folks who are in the process of separating or retiring from the military, kind of looking to assist, with that, earning an MBA to assist with that transition and help them as they move into the civilian world. And then we see other folks who have already transitioned, maybe have been out there in the civilian world for a while, and really think an MBA is going to be something that's going to help them now that they have a little bit more of the lay of the land, and help them advance their career and get where they're going. And so we have all service branches represented. We have folks who National Guard is discussed, people active duty, veteran, all number of differences within this population. I know people sometimes think about military in this very monolithic way, but that has been anything but our experience. Mike, what has the DMA? What does the DMA mean to you? What would you want prospective students to know about this organization?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of off on the back of what you said, Brett, is that it's not a monolith. So there's very unique experiences throughout the cohort as far as the military association, and it's just another networking pool of people that very much understands the very nuanced thing that is the military. So you're coming out, you need help with a VA thing. There's going to be 10 people that have just recently gone through it, that know who you are, that will then, put in a good word for you. But it's also an interesting way to find. It's as far as like, it's also a really good, interesting way to help with the networking as far as like roles that you need to fill. So it's like an interesting, if you guys are looking for very specific skill sets that you think military people lend themselves to, it's like that's just another slightly smaller pool of people that you can lean into. But then it's also like a way, a smaller place to share Joe, like highlights of military careers, stuff like that. So it's just like it's a really interesting, smaller, slightly smaller cohort with like slightly tighter bonds than maybe some of the other groups that you'll be able to join.
Yeah, I always encourage folks to think about our student organizations on the professional degree side as communities within a community, a way to sort of kind of connect with a network of people who have a shared interest, shared background, shared experience. The organizations are not typically as active as their full-time counterparts. Part of that just has to do with other things competing for people's time and bandwidth. So the relational piece is kind of an easy place to start. Gavin, I'm curious, you mentioned the Darden Defense Conference, some of the things you're doing to help sort of get other student organizations started. What are you looking forward to for DMA in the months to come? You have anything planned or any thoughts that are sort of percolating?
Yeah, the newer one is the Darden Defense Conference. Very exciting. It'll be the first one, and we hope it's a large success so we can keep it going. Mike and I are both vice presidents of the DMA, and we've talked when we transition leadership to make some inroads with full-time students, which is always a challenge just because we're up here and they're down in Charlottesville. I think the Darden Defense Conference will provide another touch point that we can hopefully link back in with them and coordinate. Mike went to the tailgate on Saturday, and that's another opportunity just to shake hands and kiss babies with the full timers, and trying to create those linkages, which is just always tough when you're geographically separated.
Yeah, Mike, the Darden Military Association on the full-time MBA side is pretty active student organization. They do a lot. What's it like to, make some of those connections, build your network? Of course, you also can connect with the part-time MBA students as well. So you have many people to meet.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting, only because the an executive program and then a full-time student are at slightly different parts of their lives. So I think it's just an interesting touch point where it's not only those guys are very focused on recruiting and getting through courses and stuff like that, where we're just trying to keep our heads above water most of the time. But it's always cool. What I found really interesting is being able to share experiences. So it's not like what we get out of the club, it's what we can provide to like maybe like a slightly younger cohort of people. And I found that to be like really rewarding when these guys have problems that they haven't seen yet, but maybe some of the executive program have seen these problems before, and to help shepherd, people through, unfamiliar waters has always been an interesting thing. So it's more of like a mentorship aspect in that as well, where I find this a lot with the defense club, where these guys are all looking for jobs, and they're looking for all these things, and you get to share some of the experiences that you have from a slightly different perspective, while having that connective tissue with the military association or some of these other clubs. So it's not really what you get out of the club at an executive level, only because you don't have a lot of time to do all the things. It's more of like, how can you help your fellow students at a different part of their lives? Just not step in the same land of mines that you did. So I think that part's been really interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, it sort of picks up on the themes that we've been talking about here, with how much of this is collaborative and offering assistance and helping where you can and accepting help and all of these kinds of things. So, one last question for the two of you. Um, Gavin, what would be a piece of advice you would want our prospective student listeners to consider? And you can certainly take a military angle with this if you want to speak directly to the active duty service members or veterans who are listening to this. But what's a piece of advice you'd like to share with our listeners that you think would be helpful to them on their MBA journeys?
The piece of advice that I always give people, especially veterans, is the hard part is getting in. Once you're in, learn what you want to or need to, do as well as you can in your class, lean on your classmates, learn from them. But we've talked about it, like ultimately the grade is not a reflection of your effort or what you're learning. And it's really what you get out of it. So try to maintain that perspective as they're going through this 2-year program. Mike's brought up some good points about how to stay connected to your family, which is an important support structure as you're going through this journey. But once you're in, like, try to maintain the goals that you have, still contribute to the communities that you join, DNMA, entrepreneurship club, whatever that might be. But you're already in. So enjoy the ride, get what you can, and then, keep moving forward.
Mike, same question for you. Any particular advice you'd like to share with our listeners?
Gavin gives really good advice, so it's tough to follow. But again, just don't lose sight of what you're here for. You're gonna make some kind of lifelong friends on this journey, and then just learn how to rely on the other people around you to get through it, and then help out where you can. But it's not a zero-sum game, so there's no winners and losers. It's just winning. So just do your best to help the people around you, and then just ask for help when you can. That's kind of the only way you can get through it while working. If you're going to go do this and have a full-time job and a family. So.
All right. Well, thank you both. It's so great catching up with you. Happy for you being at this point in the program, kind of on the downhill side, so to speak, taking electives. And I look forward to seeing you at your next weekend residency. Thank you, Gavin. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Brett. See you, Gavin.
And that was my conversation with Gavin Aydelotte and Mike McHugh, 2 second-year students in our Executive MBA class of 2026. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXECMBA @darden.virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.